Hello, and welcome to our virtual tour of the Sisters of Charity campus in Leavenworth, Kansas. We are traveling on a 12-hour bus trip from Denver, and you could say that we're on a mission to find out more information about our hospital's mission. Such being the case, we had to know what the mission of the original founders of the Sisters of Charity of Leavenworth were all about. We have lots of time to get to know our fellow travelers and colleagues on this trip, and on the way, we see a lot of greenery, cows and other critters, as well as super flat land, which means we must be getting closer to our destination. Our traveling guide tells us we are nearing the Sisters of Charity of Leavenworth, University of St. Mary campus. Here is a layout of the campus. The Sister of Charity of Leavenworth campus is shared with the main campus of the University of St. Mary. It was founded in 1923 and offers undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral programs. It has about 1,000 students, and it's near nature preserve. It has majestic academic buildings and indoor and outdoor sports facilities. The USM is also a product of the Sisters of Charity. We are concentrating primarily on the left half or southwest side of the campus. We will be entering through the K7 highway down through the Sisters entrance. Hey, look at that neat sign. Now that's a sign with heart. Wow, this place is really beautiful. We are passing by the South Campus Convent, number 21, where some of the administrative nuns live. Look at that labyrinth they have outside the South Convent. Labyrinths are used to provide mechanisms for deep meditation and prayer. By the Middle Ages, during the Crusades, the Roman Church began to use labyrinths as symbols for pilgrims to keep their vows of visiting Jerusalem. This was during a time when the Crusades made it unsafe and unwise to travel to Palestine. Labyrinths were constructed in French cathedrals. Pilgrims would walk, often on their knees, in the labyrinths. Okay, here we go, past the South Convent, and now we are arriving at the Marillac Center, number 13. Built in 2003, Marillac Center carries the name of Saint Louise de Marillac, a 17th century French woman who, together with Saint Vincent de Paul, founded the Daughters of Charity. Louise was an illegitimate infant whose widowed father of nobility sent her to a convent following his remarriage. She applied to become a Dominican sister, but was denied entry, so she married instead and became the mother of a special needs child. She lived a life of self-doubt and depression and suffered self-reproach for her failure to follow the calling she had received as a child. She even considered leaving her husband until, in a vision, she was told to stay with him, and she saw herself in a future scene helping the poor with a priest. When her husband died in 1625, she met and recognized the face from the vision as Vincent de Paul. She and de Paul formed the Daughters, specifically not sisters, because to be a religious at that time meant servitude in a cloistered convent performing prayer alone, and to be outside was unprecedented and simply not done. But their calling was outside the walls. As such, they began orphanages and went into hospitals, negotiating and partnering with management to develop healthcare teams comprised of nurses, physicians, and other healthcare staff. It was 8 years following the founding of the Daughters that Louise, along with 4 other sisters, finally took vows of chastity, poverty, and service of the poor. Her calling was fulfilled in God's perfect timing. Marillac Center, you could say, is the ideal place for us to discover our own calling, as it seeks to provide a place and atmosphere for prayer, retreat, and quiet. And so this is the place we will be staying, and where we can begin to learn and reflect on our mission and on SCL's mission to the divine call of their ministry. It's a new day and time to get up and about. Maybe we can walk around a bit and see what's outside. This is a wonderful fountain in the center of the SCL campus. Look at this beautiful and thought-provoking depiction of the crucifixion. They even have their own flags. Traveling around, we find many beautiful places to pause and reflect. Here is a statue of St. Francis of Assisi. Isn't that Mother Xavier Ross? Mother tells us to look forward, not backward, but look forward to the good that is yet to be. In 1857, Sisters of Nashville, Tennessee, became saddled with a bill not of their own cause. They sold most of their own belongings to pay off the debt. Afterwards, with Mother Xavier as their leader, they decided then to look forward. They headed for the Indian Territory of Kansas. On November 11, 1858, just 4 years after the founding of Leavenworth, 8 sisters landed from the steamboat Ryland after an 8-day trip from St. Louis. A few days later, their river trip having been suspended by an ice jam, 5 more sisters arrived by ox cart. Mother Xavier had explained to her father her visions of her work, and he asked her, "What can a woman do?" They can do a lot with God's intervention. Here is the river, the Missouri, they came down on their travels to Leavenworth at the start of their adventure. According to the Leavenworth Times, February 14, 1954 edition, the first home was 8 tiny bits of rooms in a house on Kickapoo just west of Fifth. Their household possessions brought with them consisted of 2 pianos, bedding, tableware, a small, round, one-legged marble-topped table, several chairs, 2 guitars, 14 pictures, and a small plaster image of the Blessed Virgin. For several days until a dining table could be made, the sisters ate standing up. Their first cupboard was one of the crates in which the pianos had been shipped. The floor was the only bed they had. A few days after their arrival, a friend of the sisters raffled his own small Bible, richly bound, in downtown Leavenworth for $20. And that same evening, a large load of wood was driven into the convent yard. It was just in time, because there was none left, and the night promised to be bitterly cold. In a few weeks, there were chairs enough for all, a table, and beds to sleep in, although there was no such luxury as springs. Here is Mother Ross's desk and chair. This motto of looking forward continued through their history. In France, the Daughters of Charity, progenitors and spiritual models for the Leavenworth sisters, had become nurses of the sick, caring for the elderly and orphans. The first American community similarly became teachers and nurses. The Leavenworth sisters thus remembered the poor and helpless, and Christian education also was a great necessity of their time. It was in 1864, 6 years later, when the sisters opened the first private hospital, St. John's in Kansas, with the first woman hospital head in the entire western region, Sister Joanna Bruner, who was also Kansas's first trained nurse. From the Lexington Times, the first patients to enter St. John's were 5 refugee members of a family from Alabama. Later, 5 victims of a snowstorm were unceremoniously removed from a lumber wagon on the street in front of the hospital. The quasi-Samaritan driver figured he had done his share, and the rest could be left to the sisters. Between 1865 and 1880, Kansas attracted immigrants seeking jobs, land, and education. The first wave came from Europe and Russia, following the Homestead Act in 1862. The Federal Homestead Act gave applicants to the government ownership of federal land at little or no cost. With this first wave came Sister Anacleta Flynn, the daughter of tenant farmers in County Cork, Ireland. She arrived in 1882 to join the sisters. Her 4 sisters followed. It wasn't unusual to join the sisters if your family was uneducated or they weren't landowners in Ireland, said Sister Lenore Martin, an archivist for the Sisters of Charity. What else could you do? What could they do indeed? Of the original 16 founding nuns of Leavenworth in 1858, 11 came from Ireland. Sister Anacleta helped enlist another 100 from Ireland between 1860 and 1903. After World War I, anti-immigration sentiment was rampant. Mother Mary Berkman's Canaan told the sisters to get naturalized, drop their Irish accents, and be ready to cast their ballots in opposition to a Ku Klux Klan member competing for mayor. By 1924, all the Irish-born sisters were citizens. Their story represents not only the building of critical hospitals and of the divine work of the nature of Christ, but also of the endurance of immigrants through times of racial prejudice. What they could do indeed. Care of orphans was one of the early tasks of the sisters. A fund of $7,000 was raised by the women of Leavenworth to build an orphanage of 2 stories and 8 rooms completed in 1883. According to the Leavenworth Times, it was a brick building across the street from the Academy on Kickapoo. St. Vincent's home was built in 1887 at the base of Sugarloaf in Munseyland, south of the city. It has since closed. From there, this can-do attitude carried on and on and on. Throughout the many years, wonderful collections of art, including statues, paintings, and other works glorifying God, were brought to this can-do campus. Beloved St. Joseph is called a just man in the Bible. He's the husband of Mary, an adopted father of Jesus. He's the patron of unborn children, families, expectant mothers, travelers, fathers, immigrants, emigrants, workers, carpenters, realtors, people in doubt and hesitation, fighting communism, and of a happy or holy death. Joseph is venerated as a saint in the Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, Anglican, Lutheran, and Methodist faiths. He was also declared to be the patron saint and protector of the Catholic Church by Pope Pius IX in 1870, and is the patron of several countries and regions. St. Thomas Aquinas believed that the presence of St. Joseph was essential in the plan of the Incarnation, for Mary would have been stoned to death since she was pregnant and unmarried, and thus she needed a human protector. In 1989, Pope John Paul II issued Guardian of the Redeemer. He said that the faith of Mary met the faith of Joseph in the clearest obediences of faith. This reproduction is called Our Lady of Perpetual Help, and it is associated with the Byzantine icon of the same name from the 15th century. In Eastern Orthodoxy, this is also known as the Virgin of the Passion, or Theotokos of the Passion, due to the archangels that surround the image. Here is a mosaic reproduction of the Annunciation of the Archangel Gabriel to the Virgin by Fra Angelico, who lived from 1387 to 1455. The original large fresco stands at the top of the stairway leading to the cells of the monks in the Dominican Monastery Museum of San Marco, Florence, Italy. This is a copy of Pierre Ménag's Madonna of the Grapes. It was done in the 1640s. It hangs in the Louvre. The grapes are in reference to the Song of Songs 1:14, translated as, "My lover is to me a cluster of henna blossoms from the vineyards of Engedi." Here is a facsimile painting of Madonna and Child. See the flowers in the water glass? According to Wikipedia, more than 30 flowers and herbs are connected to legends about Mary's life. This is a reproduction of the Raphael painting called Madonna della Seggiola, circulation 1516. The painting depicts the Madonna, Jesus, and St. John. See the bottle of oil? A bottle of oil could symbolize many things in biblical times: the anointing of a king, the preparation of the body for burial, and a portent of the crucifixion, for example. Here is a sculpture of Our Lady of Fatima. On May 13, 1917, she appeared in Fatima, Portugal, to 3 shepherd children, and on October 13, The Miracle of the Sun appeared to some 70,000 viewers, where the sun appeared to change colors and rotate like a wheel. 3 secrets about the future were given to the Fatima children. The sisters have an inscription honoring Mary as she protected them from an influenza epidemic in the winter of 1918 to 1919. This pandemic killed more people than World War I, at somewhere between 20 and 40 million people. It has been cited as the most devastating epidemic in recorded world history. More people died of influenza in a single year than in 4 years of the Black Death bubonic plague from 1347 to 1351. It was the sisters that took care of these victims, faithful to their mission at their very own peril. Here is an etching of St. Therese, the little flower. She made a promise of letting, quote, fall a shower of roses. I will spend my heaven doing good upon earth. Said she, I understand that the church had a heart, and that this heart was burning with love. I understood that love comprised all vocations, that love was everything, that it embraced all times and places. In a word, that it was eternal. O Jesus, my love, my vocation, at last I have found it. My vocation is love, unquote. The artist of the etching came from Europe after World War II and found a job with a construction company in Kansas. It was done in the memory of a relative's child who had died. Here is a modern stained glass rendition of wheat, and it makes us think of the bread of life, Jesus, as well as of the wheat of Kansas. Rosemary Nussbaum, a former sister, is the designer. This statue of the Sacred Heart of Jesus is an original of 7 different marbles made in Italy. The hands and feet are of peach marble. Unfortunately, a visiting artist gilded the heart, which was formerly of a special red marble. The statue was a gift from St. Mary College students in 1940, which was paid for by funds from their first spring festival given at the Music Hall in Kansas City, Missouri. It was to be shipped from Italy via the Atlantic Ocean, but war broke out and submarine warfare caused the shipment to be lost in the sea. The Italian company promised to make a new statue and send it, but they withheld doing so, fearing another loss due to the war. Time went on, and eventually the U.S. Army bombed Rome. The Italian factory was leveled to the ground. When later the rubble was cleared away, the packing box was discovered, ready for shipment and uninjured. Instead of arriving in 1940, it came in 1949. Here is an intricate carving of the birth of Christ, with a shepherd and magi bowing down to worship him, surrounded by lambs. The nativity scene previous to this is contained inside the base of the cross. It's a mother-of-pearl crucifix brought from the Holy Land by Evelyn Walsh McLean. It was to be a gift for her music teacher, a sister, who had taught her in Leadville, Colorado. Mrs. McLean was the daughter of Thomas Walsh, an Irish immigrant who became a millionaire through Colorado mining. She was the last private owner of the 45-carat Hope diamond, which was bought in 1911 for $180,000 from Pierre Cartier, as well as another famous diamond, the 94-carat, 18.8-gram Star of the East. The Hope diamond was considered misfortunate. She certainly suffered significant and numerous ones, but Evelyn never believed the curse had anything to do with her misfortunes. This is a drawing of the 5th station of the cross. Here is a stained glass work of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. This is where Jesus prayed, "If it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt." Notice the olive tree in the background. Some of these trees are still in the garden and are said to be over 900 years old. Stained glass artwork is found throughout the campus. One of the nicest things about being here is that we meet, greet, and share with our colleagues. We got to introduce ourselves and tell each other why we came here. Some said it was because the sisters' presence in the hospital made the hospital feel like a very special place, and they wanted to find out more about who the sisters were. Some were seeking a respite at a soothing place of repose. Some were seeking peace and grace. And all were seeking friendship, especially with the sisters, who graciously extended the loving offer to be one with them. What could be better for us? The campus is replete with history, and it also has archives. Archives consist of items selected for permanent or long-term preservation because they have lasting cultural, historical, or evidentiary merit. They are usually unpublished and almost always one of a kind, unlike books or magazines, for which many duplicate copies exist. We were given an archives tour that included many interesting items. This is a facsimile of the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution abolishing slavery and involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime. The original is owned by the sisters and is in safekeeping. It is one of the 13 known copies signed by President Lincoln and the Republican members of the Senate who supported the amendment. An original sisters meeting book that details the annual meeting of January 9, 1893, with an election of officials and executive committee members and other regular meetings is displayed here. There are several very knowledgeable archivists on campus. Here is Sister Barbara Sellers in front of a display of numerous valuable objects. This hand-carved oak case was purchased in 1873 for St. Joseph Hospital in Denver, Colorado. It was the first and only clock the sisters had, and they moved it with them as they went from room to room as needed. Here is a narrative of old patient records from 1873 to 1894. Most patients born in Ireland, most diagnosed with typhoid, lots of young folks with rheumatism, and there are many other interesting innuendos, such as, in 1894, a patient said he was injured in a mine explosion in Cripple Creek. Two interesting diagnoses are softening of the brain and leaded. Cerebral softening, or encephalomalacia, is a localized softening of the brain substance due to hemorrhage or inflammation. Leaded might mean absorption or ingestion that causes poisoning, which affects the brain, nervous, and digestive systems and blood. This might be related to work in the mines, perhaps. An article from the Denver Catholic Register describes an early electrically powered heart given to George Neal at St. Joseph's Hospital. It's dated January 19, 1961. There are so many more things to see in the archives. Did you know that we also have an archive here at St. Joseph Hospital, and we are presently working on developing a digitization plan for our archives too. Marillac is joined to Ross Hall. Ross Hall, number 14, and the Mother House are home to approximately 115 sisters, many of whom are retired but still active, and others are being cared for in long-term care. Ross Hall and Marillac are joined to the Mother House, which is number 12. This commemorative plaque details what these women did with God's divine guidance. They expanded to 91 schools and hospitals with facilities in Bolivia and Peru. Here is the Mother House overlooking a lovely fountain, the front facade, and the entryway. This is where many sisters live, and here is their motto. It's a heart-centered home where they witness and proclaim God's love for all. Their commitment is to love and care for each other and all who enter their doors, to respect the dignity of creation, and to create an atmosphere of prayerfulness and joy. Close to the Mother House is the Annunciation Chapel, number 11. The Annunciation Chapel stands at the central point between the Mother House and the University of St. Mary campus. Seating about 500 people, the chapel was built between 1914 and 1916 and is a replica of the Church of San Alfonso in Rome. The walls and roof are supported by Corinthian fluted columns. The wall behind the altar is done in low relief and represents the Annunciation. It was designed by a Dominican sister who was related to a Leavenworth, Sister of Charity of Leavenworth sister. Ron Dixon of Kansas City, Missouri, executed the design in the Kansas City Art Glass Studio. It's a reminder of the calling of Christ upon us all to do the work of His hands in serving His will. Remember, Mary said, "Let it be done to me according to your will." The chapel interior was renovated in 1981 through 1982 to conform to changes in liturgical action decreed by Vatican II Council. However, many of the original architectural features remain. Above the altar is a decorated marble frieze of the prayer Hail Mary in Latin. Above the altar and in the choir loft are rose windows. A pipe organ resides high above. There are carvings of symbols representing the disciples, such as the above panel for St. Simon, also known as Simon the Zealot for his rigid adherence to the Jewish law and the Canaanite law. Legend says he was martyred by being sawed into pieces for the faith in Mesopotamia. We have been asked to come to the chapel on this occasion. The sisters have been working to prepare for us a special ceremony that will bless our work in the hospital and awaken us to become committed to connections with self and the community of the Sisters of Charity of Leavenworth. So we prepare our hearts by singing and readings and praying for the concept of one is all and all is one. They seek to encourage fellowship and oneness, to dispel division, and to emphasize areas of agreement with the sisters in their mission for the hospital and for the world. This is just what many of us have come for. We pass our hands over the flames of the candles and draw the warmth of them into our bodies by crossing our hands onto our chests. This ceremony warms our hearts, enlivens our senses, and inspires our souls to really be one with the sisters. We are ever grateful for the work of the sisters, both past and present. Happy is the community that forgets not the poverty of its beginning, wrote Sister Mary Buckner, Sisters of Charity of Leavenworth. She adds, in the unwritten history of the Church of America, unwritten because the knowledge of its noblest deeds perished with the humble, heroic men and women who performed them, no chapter would be more inspiring than that which chronicles the rise and growth of our religious communities. It's a story of faith and courage. Faith in providence, because the work was God's own, the God of the sparrows and the field lilies. Courage that nothing could shake, that faced privations and hardships such as but few pioneers have ever braved. We never feared, said one of the first Leavenworth sisters. We were always in His hands. In poverty, the work was begun. In poverty, it has spread and increases mightily. For the spirit of St. Vincent de Paul is here, in the stewards of the poor and desolate.